Welcome to Reaching Out. I'm Gregory Floyd, President, Local 237 Teamsters. Today, our guest is Michael Mulgrew, President of the United Federation of Teachers. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Let's get right into the conversation. There's a lot to discuss. Recently, you've come to some resolution with the UFT and the state of New York on charter schools. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, actually, it's the state legislature who are the people who are responsible for the legislation that raised the charter cap. We started this conversation 7 months ago, where we knew the cap we were getting up to the maximum on the cap, and at the same time, once the federal government announced a race to the top initiative, and it had things on charter schools in it, we said the conversation needs to change, because right at that point, people were discussing whether we should raise the cap and how far we should raise it. And the conversation I wanted to have was, what reforms need to be done in terms of how charter schools run? Because we knew there were discrepancies. We had a separate but unequal system. And that's something that we said from the beginning, that we want to see real reforms inside of how charter schools operate. And I'm happy to say we were able to get most of the reforms we were looking for. And it's a very tough issue, but it's one where we were able to get the majority of reforms that we were calling for. Everyone said, the mayor and so many people said the reason they wanted to raise the cap was for funding from Washington, the race to the top funds, because it's such a critical circumstances we're in right now. I said, well, then why are we having for-profit management companies making a lot of money off these schools? The money that we put in, that taxpayers put into education, is for children inside of classrooms, not for somebody's pocket to make a profit off it. And I said, we have to stop this for-profit management. And the legislature heard that loud and clear, and they did pass that.
So let me ask you, you mentioned the race to the top. That was the $700 million that was going to come into the state?
Well, actually, it's a competitive grant process, so it was never coming here. There's never a guarantee, and we still don't have a guarantee now. Only 2 states out of 41 that applied received it in the first round. Will this help us with our application? Yes, but there was so much misrepresentation in the public and by the mayor and other people that this $700 million, if we ever got that amount, was going to save the school system from the cuts we're now facing from Albany. That's just not true, because this money has to be used for new programs to build data systems, and it's not allowed to be used to fill a single budget hole anywhere in this state or for any school inside of New York City. So if we do receive Race to the Top, it doesn't matter. It's not stopping and helping the students from the catastrophic cuts we're facing because of the state budget, the proposed state budgets right now, which is where we've been focusing. And I'm hoping now that we're past this issue, that we can now focus on the state budget, because that's the real danger that the children of the city and state are facing.
The state budget, currently there's a $9 billion deficit that's projected, if not higher?
It's a $9 billion deficit, and the budget that they're proposed right now, we need to figure out a way to make up $3 billion. Right now, statewide, we're looking at a $1.4 billion cut to education.
Alone.
And then on top of that, all of these other services that communities need in terms of, firehouses being closed, services being cut, and also the child welfare services, social services, everything being cut. And that's something we shouldn't have to do, because the people who are going to be harmed by this are not the people that cause this economic downfall. Those people seem to be completely unharmed.
Yeah, we're talking about Wall Street. We're talking about the investors that came up with these, I would say, schemes of derivatives, who were allowed to make these investments, and then when they went bad, Main Street got left holding the bag, and somehow the public employees unions and public pensions and public workers became the scapegoats for these entities. And now the cry is, oh, their pensions are too rich. I don't think anybody who makes $50,000 a year, who gets a pension of 55% of that, to live off of for the rest of their lives with health coverage, is somebody who's living lucrative and, living expensively. People can barely afford to pay their rent, and yet they were blamed for this crisis.
Well, it's sad that so many people are trying to say that the current crisis has to be fixed by those who had nothing to do with this. There is a loud cry out there right now to go after public sector workers and just basically middle-class people by and large. And, that's not what makes this city great. And that's going to have a negative effect on us for a long time if we don't figure this out right now. There are ways to come up with revenues to stop these cuts from happening. And these are things we have to look at. But people are trying to make this about workers. And that workers have to give. Well, the workers already have given. The Municipal Labor Council of New York City last year agreed to all sorts of health care things that save the city a lot of money. My union itself, we modified our pension plan, and we're saving the city over $100 million alone just this year, and we will do that. And that they now get those savings every year.
It's a recurring benefit.
It's a recurring benefit, but you never hear that being spoken about.
People forget about what we've done. We don't, because we still feel it.
The issue here is I keep looking back to the 1970s, and the unions of this city stopped the city from going into bankruptcy by using the very pension funds which are being attacked right now.
That's right. Yes.
But we could not stop the catastrophic cuts to services, but we were able to stop the city from going bankrupt. But there was a different feeling then in the 70s that working together, we could save the city. And that's not out there right now. I don't feel that from the elected officials. Some are great with us, and
Yes.
others I don't feel that. It's always like, what else can you give us? Which should be, how do we work it together?
You know what? I think a lot of elected officials either don't know their history or don't realize how they could use everyone to solve a problem. You could go to the person who you think doesn't have the answer. Just ask them their opinion,
Right.
and they could come up with something that could be useful.
If we don't get a state budget, we have a threefold strategy. First
Okay.
is there is an education jobs bill in Washington right now that we're working and advocating for, which it could mean up to $1.4 billion here for New York State in terms of educators' salaries. The issue is that there's a real possibility that over 300,000 teachers can be laid off nationwide this year. And the administration, the Obama administration, as well as we all understand that is not a good thing for children and not a good thing for education.
No.
So they're stepping up and they're pushing this educational jobs bill, which is a $23 billion package, which will be sent to the states to offset any of these layoffs that are happening. So that's our federal strategy. At the state level, we need a revenue package to offset the ed cuts. The education had the largest percentage of cut at the state level. It was unfair, but state education was targeted. And we need a real revenue package here. We need it's almost a $1.4 billion cut statewide. We need the state electeds to come up with a way of really getting money back into education, because this will be the 1970s again. This will, if the state budget comes down with that amount of cuts, it will be a catastrophic cut. The large class sizes, all the services, the extra services in the schools will be eliminated. Maintenance of schools will go down. So, safety and everything is going to be affected by it.
Not to mention people out of work.
And a lot of people out of work. And that's, these children in school don't get a second chance at third grade. They don't get a second chance at fourth grade. And it would take years. Look what happened in '76. The last time we had cuts of this magnitude. It took us almost 30 years to get the school system back in order. And I think working together now, we can offset this and do the right thing.
Michael, it's certainly been a pleasure. This was a lot of fun. That's all the time we have for this edition of Reaching Out. My many thanks to President Michael Mulgrew from the United Federation of Teachers. I'm Gregory Floyd, President Teamsters Local 237. Until the next time, thank you.
Thank you, Greg.